This is Immigration Attorney Parviz Malakouti, and in this video we're going to go over adjustment of status and specifically the timeline and overview of how the process works. So adjustment of status is a green card application for an applicant that wants to apply for the green card from within the United States and stay within the United States throughout the whole duration of the process. There's several steps to the adjustment of status process, several steps to a successful one, just like with most immigration processes. We're going to go over those steps right now. So the first step is actually determining eligibility of the applicant. You definitely want to go to a qualified professional, which is always a licensed immigration attorney, to make sure that you or the applicant is qualified, especially if there's any criminal history or any immigration violation history. After the person's been deemed to be eligible, if so, the second step is to get into the gathering of the documents, okay, the documents in support, which is typically a lot of documents, and as well as the preparation of the forms. It's not just one form, it's several forms that have to be filled out for adjustment of status. And those forms depend, of course, depending on the basis for the adjustment of status, as well as a few other factors. For example, if there's going to be a co-sponsor, if the applicant is going to work, etc., etc. After gathering the documentation and the forms and having all of those checked out, what we do is we send in the application. We send it either registered mail or by UPS. You always want to have a tracking number attached to that so you can track the package and make sure that USCIS doesn't claim that they didn't receive it later on, especially if you're up against a deadline. After submitting the actual package, the adjustment of status package, which is usually a few hundred pages, you then wait for a receipt, okay, a receipt notice. Now, typically in pre-COVID times, a receipt notice would reliably come within 3 to 5 weeks of having sent off the package. Still, sometimes we get some adjustment of status application packages which have a receipt notice in that time period. But also during COVID, we've had applications that have gone a few months actually before receiving the receipt notice. The next step is one of a couple things. Typically, the applicant needs to go to get their fingerprints taken. So they'll get a biometrics notice that will send them to a USCIS office close to them to get their biometrics taken. That can sometimes be the next step after the receipt notice. However, another step that can come is you could possibly get what's called a request for evidence or a request for initial evidence. And that's basically a notice from USCIS that's saying that they don't have some sort of information that they need in order to evaluate your eligibility for this application. So what could that information be? It can be typically one of three categories. One is a question or several questions was left blank on the form, okay? Another one is a document that's missing. And the third category is you could actually be requested to make a legal argument as to why you qualify for something or why you should not be excluded from eligibility based off of some sort of factor in your case. And again, it's not very possible to speak with specificity about this because every case is different, right? So RFEs can look totally different. You can have a simple RFE, which is very, very easy. You can have what's called a complex RFE. The next step is either the RFE or, of course, the biometrics notice. And then typically, by the way, in between these different steps, you can have several weeks or even several months of period of waiting. So you wait. Oftentimes we say in immigration that immigration law is a lot of hurry up and wait. Hurry up to gather everything, send it all in and then wait. Sometimes weeks, sometimes months. Assuming that USCIS is satisfied with your reply to an RFE, if there's an RFE, and plenty of cases do not have RFEs, the next step is typically to be scheduled for an immigration interview, an adjustment of status interview, okay? Now, if the adjustment of status is based on marriage, which is very common, of course, then typically both the applicant and the petitioner, which is the US citizen spouse, will have to attend the interview, okay? These interviews can go all different ways. Sometimes they're pleasant, sometimes they're unpleasant, sometimes they're quick, sometimes they're long. It's very much specific to the case. And also, the truth is it's very specific to who the officer is that you get, okay? Unfortunately, the actual personality and demeanor of the officer comes into play a lot with these types of things. There are some USCIS officers that are incredibly professional, kind, they do their job well. There's some USCIS officers, not so much. So we never know who you're gonna get when you go to an adjustment of status interview. Now with my clients, in addition to preparing the application, sending it in and responding to the request for evidence, I also prepare the clients and attend at the interview. I sit there in the interview in person, okay? Make sure that every question that's being asked is appropriate. Make sure that we're not having an issue that comes up in the interview that we cannot address. So after the interview, people ask me all the time, am I going to be approved at the interview? Do I get a green card at the interview? And the answer is typically not. Okay, so each USCIS field office is a little bit different in the way they handle the notification after the interview, but typically you're going to have one of a few things happen. Some field offices will say at the end of the interview, thank you, you'll receive a notice from us with the results of the interview. And then after that, you could get a notice, congratulations, or you could get another request for evidence asking for more information, sometimes related to some sort of factor, some sort of topic that came up in the interview. However, some other field offices handle the notice that they give you at the end of the interview a little bit different, okay? Some will give you a piece of paper that will say a decision cannot be made at this time, okay? Some will give you a piece of paper that will say something along the lines of congratulations, you've been recommended for approval, okay? So there's a little bit of variability in how the USCIS field office handles the interview at the end of the interview, okay? But one thing is for sure, you definitely do not walk away from that interview with a green card and being a legal permanent resident, okay? So there is always a little bit of, at least a little period of wait after the interview. And sometimes there can be more than a little period of wait, depending on what is found in the interview, or sometimes the USCIS field office or the adjudicator is just delaying, okay? And there are certain things that can be done by an attorney if there's a delay to basically force USCIS to come up with a decision on that case. Anyway, assuming that everything went well during that interview, okay, you'll receive a notice in the mail, maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks afterwards, congratulating you, saying congratulations, you have been approved for legal permanent residence, and then also giving the green card as well, the actual physical green card. Now, when that green card comes, one thing that I do with my clients, and you definitely want to do yourself, is to check the green card and make sure that all the information is correct on it. So you want to make sure the spelling is correct, okay, the date of birth is correct, and then one thing that is a common mistake, it's not very common, but it happens from USCIS, is that they put bizarre dates on the validity period of the green card. So there's typically 2 validity periods for green cards. There's a conditional green card, which usually gets a validity period of 2 years. And remember, a conditional green card is for spouses of US citizens that have been married to them for less than 2 years at the time they become a permanent resident. Those people get a 2-year conditional green card. The other categories of green cards on the family-based side usually get a 10-year green card, okay? So you wanna make sure that when you get that green card, you check the validity period and make sure that you either got 2 years or 10 years, depending on your situation. Sometimes USCIS comes up with bizarre validity periods. I've seen green cards that have validity periods that are in the past, okay, even before the interview. So it's clearly a mistake. That was some sort of goof up. And there's things that can be done there, obviously, to fix that situation. That's for another video. That's not something I'm going to handle in this video. That's the basic overview of the timeline of an application for adjustment of status. If you have questions about your specific situation, click on the link below, book a paid consultation, we can get into your situation. And similarly, if you want to not deal with any of the hassle of learning these little things and figuring out how to do this, if you just want to have a lawyer represent you and take care of it for you, click on the same link below, book a consultation, we'll get into your case, we'll talk about any obstacles you may have, any issues, and then of course timeline and price for the case.